Shadows of the Forgotten Kingdom, a short story in dark fantasy style. If you like our stories, subscribe for more. Chapter 1. The Call of Karath. In the heart of a bustling, grimy tavern, nestled in the shadowy outskirts of a nameless city, Thorgar, the grizzled warrior, sat alone. His eyes, as cold and hard as the northern glaciers, scanned the room, ever watchful. His hand rested lightly on the hilt of his sword, a constant companion in this world of treachery and danger. His heart, however, was far from this place, lost in the memories of a brother he had failed. A sudden commotion broke his reverie. A group of drunken mercenaries had taken offense to a stranger's words. The stranger, a frail old man, was cornered, his back against the wall. Thorgar watched as the situation escalated. He had no love for bullies, but he was no fool either. He knew better than to interfere in a fight that wasn't his. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. As the old man fell, his eyes locked onto Thorgar's. There was a plea in those eyes, a desperate call for help. And in that moment, Thorgar made his choice. Blur of steel and fury, Thorgar moved with a deadly grace, his every strike precise and lethal. The mercenaries, taken by surprise, stood no chance. One by one they fell, until only Thorgar and the old man remained. As the dust settled, Thorgar turned to the old man. He was dying, his lifeblood seeping onto the tavern floor. With a trembling hand, he reached into his cloak and pulled out a worn, ancient map.
"Karath!"
he whispered, his voice barely audible.
"Find Narga! Save—"
The old man's voice trailed off. His eyes glazed over and he slumped to the floor, dead. Thorgar looked at the map, his heart pounding. Karath! A name he had heard only in whispers and old wives' tales. A forgotten kingdom, shrouded in mystery and darkness. And Nargar, his brother. Could it be? Thorgar left the tavern, the old man's words echoing in his mind. As he stepped into the cold night, he looked at the map once more. A journey into the unknown awaited him, a journey into Karath. His grip tightened around the map. He would find Nargar. He would uncover the truth, and woe betide anyone who stood in his way. The city behind him was a labyrinth of deceit and danger, but it was a known danger. Karath was a different beast altogether. It was a place where the line between the living and the dead was blurred, where shadows held unspeakable horrors, and where even the bravest souls feared to tread. But Thorgar was no ordinary soul. He was a warrior, a survivor. He had faced death more times than he could count, and he had always emerged victorious. The journey would be perilous, of that he had no doubt. He would have to cross treacherous mountains, navigate through dense, eerie forests, and traverse sprawling, desolate ruins. He would have to face creatures of the night, minions of the dark, and perhaps even the darkness within his own soul. But he was ready. For Nargar, he would brave the depths of hell itself. As he set off into the night, the map clutched tightly in his hand, Thorgar felt a strange sense of anticipation. His heart pounded in his chest, not with fear, but with excitement. The road ahead was shrouded in darkness and uncertainty, but it was a path he had chosen. It was his destiny. And so, under the cloak of darkness, Thorgar embarked on his journey, his mind filled with thoughts of Nargar and the forgotten kingdom of Karath. The road ahead was long and fraught with danger, but he was undeterred. He was a warrior, after all, and warriors did not back down from a challenge. They faced it head-on, with their heads held high and their swords at the ready. As the city faded into the distance, Thorgar felt a sense of liberation. He was leaving behind a world of deceit and treachery and stepping into a world of mystery and adventure. It was a world he did not know, a world that held many dangers, but it was a world that also held the promise of answers. And for those answers, Thorgar was willing to risk it all. The first chapter of his journey had begun. The Call of Karath had been answered, and Thorgar, the grizzled warrior, was ready to face whatever lay ahead. For in his heart, he knew that this was just the beginning. The real battle was yet to come. Chapter 2. The Shadows Stir. The sun had barely risen when Thorgar, the grizzled warrior, found himself standing at the threshold of Karath. The ancient kingdom, shrouded in an eerie twilight, seemed to breathe an ominous welcome. The air was heavy with the scent of decay, a grim reminder of the once thriving civilizations that had fallen into oblivion. Thorgar ventured deeper into the kingdom, his eyes taking in the sprawling ruins of ancient civilizations. Crumbling stone structures overgrown with moss and entwined with gnarled roots bore silent testimony to the passage of time. Hieroglyphs etched into the stone whispered tales of glory and downfall, of kings and sorcerers, of magic and betrayal. The deeper he went, the more palpable the aura of dark magic became, a chilling sensation that crawled up his spine and lingered in his marrow. Suddenly, the silence was shattered by a guttural growl. Emerging from the shadows were grotesque creatures, their bodies twisted and deformed, their eyes glowing with an unholy light. They were the minions of Zulthar, the enigmatic sorcerer, remnants of souls trapped and twisted by dark magic. Thorgar's hand instinctively went to the hilt of his sword, the cold steel a comforting weight against the encroaching darkness. The battle was fierce and brutal. Thorgar fought with the ferocity of a cornered beast, his sword dancing a deadly waltz with the minions. Each swing of his blade cut through the air, severing the ties that bound these creatures to their tormented existence. As the last of them fell, Thorgar stood panting, his body aching, but his spirit unbroken. In the aftermath of the battle, Thorgar found a strange amulet on one of the fallen minions. It was an ancient artifact, pulsating with dark energy. As he held it, visions flooded his mind. He saw Zulthar, his figure shrouded in shadows, standing in the heart of Karath. He saw the sorcerer's hands weaving complex patterns in the air, his voice chanting an ancient incantation. He saw the ground splitting open, and from the depths a malevolent entity began to stir. The vision left Thorgar reeling. He now understood the gravity of the situation. Zulthar was not just resurging. He was attempting to awaken an ancient entity, a force so malevolent that its release could plunge the world into eternal darkness. The forgotten kingdom of Karath was not just a battlefield, it was the epicenter of a cataclysm waiting to happen. As the sun set, casting long, grotesque shadows over the ruins, Thorgar knew that his journey was just beginning. The path ahead was fraught with danger, but he was ready. He was not just a mercenary anymore, he was a warrior on a mission, a beacon of hope in the encroaching darkness. The shadows of Karath stirred, whispering of battles yet to come, of secrets yet to be unveiled, of a destiny yet to be embraced. And amidst the ruins, Thorgar stood tall, a solitary figure against the twilight, ready to challenge the shadows. Chapter 3. Blood and Prophecy. As Thorgar ventured deeper into the heart of Karath, the landscape grew increasingly alien and foreboding. The towering mountains loomed like ancient titans, their peaks lost in the swirling mists of perpetual twilight. The dense forests whispered with unseen life, their shadows dancing with spectral light. The ruins of forgotten civilizations lay scattered across the landscape, their silent stones telling tales of glory and despair. One day, while navigating through a particularly dense part of the forest, Thorgar was ambushed. A group of indigenous people, their bodies adorned with tribal markings and their eyes filled with suspicion, surrounded him. Despite his attempts to communicate peacefully, they knocked him unconscious. When Thorgar awoke, he found himself in a dimly lit cave, his hands bound. The cave was filled with the scent of burning herbs, and the walls were adorned with primitive paintings depicting battles, kings, and monstrous entities. The tribe's elder, a frail woman with piercing eyes, approached him. She introduced herself as Yara, the tribe's seer. She spoke in a dialect that was old and almost forgotten, but Thorgar, having spent years in different lands, understood her. Yara told him about an ancient prophecy that spoke of a blood of the forgotten king who would rise to confront the shadow of eternal night. As Yara recited the prophecy, Thorgar felt a chill run down his spine. The words resonated within him, echoing in the depths of his soul. He thought of the dying man's message, of his journey to Karath, and of the strange signs he had encountered. Could he be the one the prophecy spoke of? Yara seemed to read his thoughts. She told him that his royal lineage was evident in his aura, that he was the last descendant of Karath's ancient kings. She also revealed that his brother Nargar was not just a captive, but a pawn in the sorcerer's game. Zulta, she said, sought to use Nargar to awaken the ancient entity trapped beneath Karath. Thorgar was skeptical. He was a mercenary, a man of the sword, not a king. And yet, he couldn't deny the strange sense of destiny that was beginning to take hold of him. He thought of his brother, of the danger he was in, and of the world that was on the brink of eternal darkness. Could he turn his back on all of that? As he grappled with these revelations, Yara offered him a choice. He could deny his destiny and leave, or he could embrace it and receive the tribe's help. She warned him, however, that the path of the king was fraught with danger and sacrifice. Thorgar looked into Yara's eyes, seeing the weight of centuries and the wisdom of ages. He thought of his past, of the choices he had made, and of the man he had become. He thought of his brother, of the love they shared, and of the promise he had made to find him. And he thought of the world, of its beauty and its fragility, and of the darkness that threatened to engulf it. In that moment, Thorgar made his choice. He chose to embrace his destiny, to fight for his brother, and to stand against the shadow. He was Thorgar, son of Karath, and he would not falter. As he voiced his decision, Yara nodded, a glimmer of hope in her eyes. The tribe, who had been watching the exchange in silence, erupted into cheers. That night, they celebrated, their songs echoing through the forest, their fires painting the night with warmth. But amidst the celebration, Thorgar knew that the real battle was yet to come. As he looked at the tribal paintings, at the monstrous entities and the ancient kings, he felt a sense of foreboding. But he also felt a sense of resolve. He was Thorgar, son of Karath, and he was ready to face his destiny. As the night wore on, Thorgar found himself drawn to the paintings on the cave walls. He studied them, tracing the lines with his eyes, trying to decipher their meaning. He saw images of great battles, of kings and queens, of monsters and gods. He saw the rise and fall of civilizations, the cycle of life and death, the eternal struggle between light and darkness. He saw a figure that looked like him, standing against a shadowy entity, a sword in his hand and a crown on his head. He saw the figure battling the entity, their clash shaking the heavens and the earth. And he saw the figure standing victorious, the entity vanquished and the world saved from eternal darkness. As Thorgar looked at the painting, he felt a sense of awe and fear. He was looking at his destiny, at the path that lay before him. It was a path of danger and sacrifice, of pain and loss. But it was also a path of courage and hope, of love and redemption. As the dawn broke, Thorgar stood before the tribe, his eyes filled with determination. He thanked them for their hospitality and their guidance and promised to fulfill his destiny. He then set off, leaving the tribe and the cave behind, and venturing deeper into the heart of Karath. As he walked, Thorgar felt a sense of purpose and resolve. He was no longer just a mercenary, a man of the sword. He was Thorgar, son of Karath, the last descendant of the ancient kings. He was the one the prophecy spoke of, the one destined to confront the shadow of eternal night, and he was ready. Chapter 4. The Sorcerers Stronghold. The stronghold of Zulthar, the sorcerer, loomed ominously against the twilight sky of Karath. Its jagged towers and darkened parapets were a stark silhouette against the dying embers of the day. Thorgar, the grizzled warrior, stood at the foot of the stronghold, his heart pounding with a mix of anticipation and dread. He had journeyed through treacherous terrains, battled Zulthar's skeletal minions, and now he was at the heart of the sorcerer's dominion. His brother Nagar was somewhere within these cold stone walls, a puppet in Zulthar's nefarious game. With a deep breath, Thorgar stepped forward, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword. The stronghold was eerily quiet, the silence only broken by the occasional gust of wind that howled through the desolate landscape. He moved stealthily, his eyes scanning for any signs of danger. As he ventured deeper into the stronghold, he could feel the oppressive weight of dark magic in the air. It was a tangible presence, a cold, creeping dread that slithered along his spine. He pushed forward, his resolve steeling him against the fear. Suddenly, the silence was shattered by the clattering of bones. Thorgar whirled around, his sword drawn, as skeletal guards emerged from the shadows. Their hollow eye sockets glowed with an unholy light, and they moved with a jerky, unnatural speed. Thorgar fought with the ferocity of a cornered beast, his sword slicing through bone and shadow. Each defeated guard crumbled into a pile of bones, only for another to take its place. It was a relentless, exhausting battle, but Thorgar refused to yield. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the last of the skeletal guards fell. Thorgar stood alone in the echoing silence, his breath ragged and his body aching from the fight. But there was no time to rest. He had to find Nagar. He pressed on, his footsteps echoing through the vast empty halls of the stronghold. He came upon a heavy iron door, its surface etched with ancient runes. With a grunt, he pushed it open, revealing a dimly lit chamber. In the center of the chamber, bound by chains of shadow, was Narga. His eyes were vacant, his spirit seemingly crushed under Zulthar's control. Seeing his brother in such a state ignited a fury in Thorgar, a burning rage that threatened to consume him. And then, from the shadows, Zulthar emerged. His eyes glowed with a malevolent light, and a cruel smile played on his lips. "Welcome, Thorgar," he said, his voice echoing in the chamber. "I've been expecting you." Thorgar's grip tightened on his sword. He was ready to fight, ready to free his brother from Zulthar's grasp. But as he looked into the sorcerer's glowing eyes, he knew that this was just the beginning of his battle. The confrontation was intense, a battle of wills as much as a physical fight. Zulthar's magic was potent, his spells weaving a web of darkness around Thorgar. But Thorgar was relentless, his warrior spirit undeterred by the sorcerer's power. They clashed in the heart of the stronghold, the echoes of their battle reverberating through the stone halls. Thorgar's sword met Zulthar's magic, sparks of energy flying with each collision. It was your dance of death, a symphony of destruction that shook the very foundations of the stronghold. In the midst of the chaos, Thorgar's eyes never left Nagar. His brother was still bound, still under Zulthar's control. But there was a flicker of recognition in his eyes, a glimmer of the brother he once knew. With a final desperate push, Thorgar broke through Zulthar's defenses. His sword found its mark, cutting through the sorcerer's magic and striking him. Zulthar let out a cry, his form flickering as his magic waned. But the battle was far from over. Zulthar was weakened, but not defeated, and Naga was still a prisoner, still trapped in the sorcerer's grasp. As Thorgar stood in the heart of the stronghold, his body bruised and battered, he knew that the real fight was just beginning. Chapter 5. The Curse of the Mirror. The air in the stronghold was heavy with the stench of decay, a grim reminder of Zulthar's necromantic powers. Thorgar moved silently through the labyrinthine corridors, his heart pounding in his chest like a war drum. His mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, but one thing was clear: he needed to find a mirror. He remembered the words of the old seer, her voice raspy yet resonant. The sorcerer cannot bear his own reflection. It is his curse, his doom. The idea seemed ludicrous, but Thorgar had seen enough of the world to know that truth often wore the cloak of absurdity. As he ventured deeper into the stronghold, he came across a grand hall, its walls adorned with ancient tapestries depicting battles and rituals of a bygone era. At the far end of the hall, he spotted a large ornate mirror, its silver surface gleaming eerily in the dim light. Thorgar approached it cautiously, his reflection staring back at him, a grim spectre in the gloom. He was about to take the mirror when he heard a familiar voice. "Thorgar!" The voice was weak, almost a whisper, but Thorgar would recognize it anywhere. It was Naga. He turned around to see his brother, chained to a wall, his body frail and his eyes vacant. Thorgar rushed to him, his heart aching at the sight. "Naga, it's me, Thorgar," he said, his voice choked with emotion. Naga looked at him, his eyes slowly focusing. "Thorgar," he repeated, a flicker of recognition lighting up his face. But then his expression changed, his eyes filled with fear. "No, you must leave. He'll kill you." Thorgar shook his head. "I'm not leaving without you, Nagar." He looked around, searching for the key to the chains. He found it on a nearby table, next to a pile of scrolls and a skull. He unlocked the chains and Nargar slumped forward, his body weak from captivity. "Listen, Nargar," Thorgar said, his voice urgent. "I need your help. I need to use a mirror against Zulthar. Do you know where I can find one?" Nargar looked at him, confusion clouding his eyes. "Mirror?" he mumbled. Then his eyes widened. "The Grand Hall. There's a mirror, but it's guarded." Thorgar nodded. "I've seen it. I'll handle the guards. You just rest here." He helped Nagar sit down, then turned to leave. "Wait," Nargar said, grabbing his arm. "Be careful, Thorgar. Zulthar. He's not what he seems." Thorgar looked at him, his heart heavy with worry. "I know, Narga, but I have to do this. For us, for Karath." He squeezed Narga's hand, then left the room. His resolve hardened. As he approached the Grand Hall again, he could see the skeletal guards, their empty eye sockets glowing with an unholy light. Thorgar gripped his sword, ready for the fight, but he knew he couldn't confront Zulthar. Not yet. He needed the mirror, and he needed to get Nagar out of the stronghold. With a deep breath, he stepped into the hall, his eyes on the mirror. The skeletal guards turned towards him, their bones clattering in the silence. Thorgar raised his sword, his heart pounding in his chest. The battle was about to begin, and the fate of Karath hung in the balance. The skeletal guards lunged at him, their movements unnaturally swift. Thorgar met them with the fury of a storm, his sword cutting through bone and shadow. He fought with the desperation of a man with everything to lose, his every strike a prayer to the gods of war. One by one, the guards fell, their bones scattering across the stone floor. Thorgar stood in the midst of the carnage, his breath ragged, his body aching. But he had won. The mirror was his. He took a moment to catch his breath. Then he picked up the mirror. It was heavier than it looked, its frame intricately carved with symbols of a forgotten language. Thorgar looked at his reflection, his face hardened by battle, his eyes burning with determination. With the mirror in his possession, he returned to Naga. His brother was still weak, but the sight of Thorgar seemed to give him strength.
You did it,
Naga whispered, a small smile playing on his lips. Thorgar nodded, helping Nagaria to his feet. We're not out of this yet, Nagar, but we're one step closer. He looked at the mirror, then at his brother. Together, we'll face Zulta, and we'll win. As they left the room, Thorgar couldn't help but feel a sense of hope. They had a long way to go, and the road ahead was fraught with danger. But they had each other, and they had a chance. And sometimes, that was all you needed. Chapter 6. The Battle of Fates. The air in Zultar's throne room was thick with anticipation. Thorgar, his muscles aching from the strain of battle, stood tall, his eyes locked on the sorcerer. Nagar, newly freed from Zultar's enchantment, stood by his side, his expression a mix of fear and determination. Zulta, surrounded by his skeletal guards, sat on his throne, a cruel smile playing on his lips. So, the lost Prince of Karath has come to reclaim his kingdom, he taunted, his voice echoing through the vast chamber. Thorgar gripped his sword tighter, his knuckles white. I'm not here for a kingdom, Zultar, he retorted. I'm here for my brother, and for justice. Zultar laughed, a chilling sound that sent shivers down Thorgar's spine. Justice? In this world? How quaint. Ignoring Zultar's mockery, Thorgar turned to Nargar.
Remember our plan,
he said, his voice barely a whisper. Nargar nodded, his hand reaching for the small, polished mirror they had brought with them. With a battle cry, Thorgar charged at Zultar, his sword raised. The skeletal guards moved to intercept him, but Nargar was faster. He stepped forward, holding up the mirror. The room filled with a blinding light as Zultar's reflection hit the mirror. Zultar screamed, his body starting to disintegrate. No! He cried out, his voice filled with terror. This cannot be! But it was too late. With a final agonizing scream, Zultar vanished, leaving nothing but his empty throne behind. The skeletal guards, no longer under Zultar's control, collapsed into piles of bones. The room fell silent. The only sound, Thorgar's heavy breathing. He turned to Nagar, a smile spreading across his face. We did it, brother, he said, clapping Nagar on the shoulder. Nagar returned the smile, his eyes shining with relief. Yes, we did, he agreed, but our journey is far from over. Thorgar nodded, his gaze turning to the throne. Zultar may be gone, but his threat remains, he said. We must find a way to stop the ancient entity he sought to awaken. Nagar nodded, his expression serious. Together we will face whatever comes our way, he said. After all, we are the last of Karath's kings. With that, the brothers left the throne room, their hearts filled with a newfound sense of purpose. They knew the road ahead would be fraught with danger, but they were ready. For they were not just Thorgar and Nargar anymore. They were the princes of Karath, destined to save their kingdom from the shadows of the forgotten past. As they stepped out of the throne room, the brothers found themselves in the heart of Zultar's stronghold, a labyrinth of dark corridors and hidden traps. But Thorgar, with his warrior's instincts, and Nargar, with his knowledge gained during captivity, navigated through the maze with surprising ease. They encountered remnants of Zultar's minions along the way, creatures twisted by dark magic, their humanity long forgotten. But the brothers fought side by side, their bond stronger than any dark force. With each enemy they defeated, their confidence grew, their resolve hardened. They journeyed deeper into the stronghold, the air growing colder, the shadows darker. They came across ancient inscriptions, tales of Karath's past glory, and prophecies of its downfall. Thorgar felt a pang of sorrow for his lost kingdom, a longing to restore it to its former glory. As they ventured further, they discovered the heart of Zulthar's power, a massive underground chamber filled with dark energy. In the center, a large crystal pulsed with an eerie light. The ancient entity Zulthar sought to awaken. Thorgar and Nagar exchanged a glance, understanding the task ahead. They had to destroy the crystal to prevent the entity from awakening, but they knew it wouldn't be easy. The crystal was protected by a powerful force field, and the chamber was crawling with Zulthar's most powerful minions. But the brothers were undeterred. They fought with all their might, their swords clashing against the monstrous creatures. They moved in perfect sync, their years of training and brotherly bond making them an unstoppable force. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they reached the crystal. Thorgar, with a mighty swing of his sword, shattered the force field. Nagar, using a spell he had learned during his captivity, destroyed the crystal. The chamber shook with the force of the explosion, the dark energy dissipating. The brothers, exhausted but victorious, emerged from the stronghold, the first rays of dawn greeting them. They stood there, side by side, looking at the ruins of Zulthar's stronghold. They had won a major battle, but the war was far from over. They had a kingdom to reclaim, a legacy to uphold. But for now, they took a moment to enjoy their victory, to celebrate their brotherhood. They had faced the shadows of the forgotten past, and they had emerged stronger. They were ready for whatever lay ahead. For they were Thorgar and Nagar, the last kings of Karath, the heroes of their own epic tale.